Father Gerald Murray and Robert Royal are next, but first, former Vatican nuncio to the U.S. and whistleblower Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano sent an open letter to President Donald Trump, warning the president about the threats of globalism and the so-called deep state. In the letter, Vigano ascribes a political motive to the management of COVID-19, calling it a colossal operation of social engineering. He also claims that the children of darkness are using the protests to legitimize violence and crime. President Trump thanked the former nuncio for the letter via a tweet which read, "So honored by Archbishop Vigano's incredible letter to me." And in Rome, Pope Francis made a couple of significant appointments this week. Bishop Mitchell Rosansky of Springfield, Massachusetts, has been named the 10th Archbishop of St. Louis. Archbishop-elect Rosansky succeeds Archbishop Robert Carlson, who reached mandatory retirement age last year. Rosansky is said to have a warm pastoral style and is described as a solid moderate. With this appointment, Pope Francis will have named 13 of the 32 metropolitan archbishops in the U.S. Also appointed, 49-year-old Monsignor David Toups of St. Petersburg, Florida, was named Bishop of Beaumont, Texas. Toups has been a parish priest as well as a seminary rector. He also worked for a time at the Bishops' Conference. Joining me now with in-depth analysis of all of this and much more is the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org, Robert Royal, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to get right to this. It's now come to light that D.C. Archbishop Wilton Gregory was invited to attend that presidential event at the St. John Paul II Shrine several days before the event took place, and not the night before, as was originally reported in some media. In correspondence obtained by CNA, the Archbishop's office declined the, quote, kind invitation to attend the event celebrating international religious freedom on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020 at the John Paul II Shrine, and due to a prior commitment, he couldn't attend. Now, Archbishop Gregory objected to the presence of the president, which he said was a misuse and manipulation of the shrine. Catholic bishops have dealt with presidents with whom they disagree over decades. Why do you think Archbishop Gregory is so aggressive in his denunciation of this visit? Robert Royal.
I think he doesn't like President Trump. It's very clear, and he has a right to like or not dislike him. But as Archbishop of Washington, D.C., he has an obligation to be the bishop of everybody in this city. And I think that whether he knew a week ahead of time or a day ahead of time, it didn't help things to put out this inflammatory statement when what he could have said was, this is an inopportune time, the country is in turmoil, there are riots everywhere. Instead, he made it appear, and I think Father Raymond D'Souza wrote a beautiful article about this, he made it personal as well as political. So I just don't think this was the best approach at a time when we needed someone not to just politicize, but to use that Christian standpoint to bring peace and healing and reconciliation.
Mm-hmm. No, it could have been a real bridge-building moment. Father Jerry, you want to add anything?
Well, Raymond, the Archbishop had regretted that he couldn't be at the event a few days before he issued that press statement. And, he said he regretted the inability to attend an event, which he later then basically said was reprehensible. So there's different messaging going on here. One thing to the White House, one thing to the rest of the world. It's better to just respect the presidency, no matter who holds it, and leave it at that.
Yeah. On Monday, Catholic priests were invited by Father Daniel Carson, he's the Vicar General of the Archdiocese of Washington, to join a prayerful protest in front of the White House. Clergy were instructed to wear their cassocks, habit, or black clerical shirt, and to bring a water and mask and a hat. As appropriate signs and posters were suggested as well. Now, several priests said they were surprised by the invitation, especially given that priests have been told for weeks they cannot meet in groups of the faithful or open churches. So it's okay to meet if you're protesting, but not for Mass. Robert Royal, your thoughts?
Well, again, I think the Archbishop is passionate about race relations, and that's fine, that he should try to do what he can to move it forward. But what he's done in other context. He's put out other statements. He spoke at Georgetown last week, and he says that what people are trying to tell him is he shouldn't be involved. I don't think that that's true at all. I think that people are saying be involved, but also be aware that you too have to be politically neutral. And instead, what has happened is he's put himself on one side as if Donald Trump represents racism, and he's the reason why we've had this horrible situation in this country. Look, when Barack Obama was president, a black man as president, we also had police violence. We also had rioting and looting. So it's not the man in the White House that does this, like him or not like him. And of course, Trump does raise passions on both sides. But I think he's putting himself that makes it easy to dismiss him as if he were just on one side of a partisan divide rather than someone who is trying to bring all sides together.
Okay. I want to share something the Pope read at his Wednesday audience, and this was a message particularly about what we're encountering here in the United States. He said, "I've witnessed with great concern the disturbing social unrest in your nation in these past days following the tragic death of Mr. George Floyd. We cannot tolerate or turn a blind eye to racism and exclusion in any form, and yet claim to defend the sacredness of every human life." Now, a visiting fellow at Yale Divinity School told the AP, quote, "Francis wants to send a clear message, a very clear message, to those conservative Catholics who are pro-Trumpers that, listen, this is just as much of an issue as abortion is, and to pay attention to the racism that is happening and the racism that is in your own church in America." I'd like to get your reaction, Father Jerry Murray.
Well, that's overstating it. To blame the President of the United States for the horrible killing of George Floyd by a criminal police officer, that's not Donald Trump's fault. I think there's a transference going on here that people who don't like Trump are now basically saying Trump is a racist, the Republicans are racist, we have to turn away from that. Let everybody in a free society can make their own judgments, but to claim, as this person is now saying, that Pope Francis is suddenly aligning everybody with the anti-Trump movement, this is too much. And let me just say also that, the exploration of the state of the United States regarding racism should be done rationally, calmly, and with facts, and not with this coercive spirit of, unless you agree with Black Lives Matter and their demands to defund the police, then you're a racist. That's horrible. In fact, that is a kind of a coercive speech and using of cruelty against your opponent by basically saying, if you don't agree with us right from the start, you're a racist and we're not going to talk to you anymore. That's not the way this country should be managing its affairs.
On Wednesday, the State Department released the 2019 International Religious Freedom Report. During the news conference, Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, commented on how COVID could be used by governments. Watch.
We're very concerned that in the future, you're going to see a number of governments that see an advantage here, a chance, okay, we shut down all these religious institutions. We're going to keep them shut down after the COVID crisis passes because we don't like these religious institutions operating freely in the first place.
Now, Robert Royal, I've heard from some bishops suggesting that the COVID-19 is being used conveniently here in the U.S. to discourage people or stop people from gathering at Mass while indulging protesters. Do you expect the U.S. bishops to speak out on this issue and our First Amendment right?
Well, I don't expect it, but I wish they would, because there's a fundamental relationship between the church and the government at stake here. Now, we are nervous in this country, where we still have a large swath of our people who are religious and affirm that in public and try to hold our government accountable. We can imagine what is going to happen in other parts of the world where they don't have a religious or a political tradition and have very high-handed government authorities who don't even need the excuse for COVID, but will just use this as one step further. So I think our bishops have to be quite firm about this, quite firm that they believe in the science, they believe in keeping people safe, but also in the fact that the churches should not be treated differently than other essential institutions in society.
Right. All right. Speaking of religious freedoms, China has one of the worst records and continues to persecute the faithful there. The Vatican-China deal is set to expire in September. And this week, Archbishop Claudio Maria Celli, who was instrumental in negotiating and executing the first Vatican-China deal, said the Holy See should probably reconfirm the deal for 1 or 2 years. Celli went on to say this, quote, "It will not be easy. The Holy See still wants to continue on this step. We want to move forward, and we want to reach a normality in which Chinese Catholics can express all of his fidelity to the gospel and also with respect to his being Chinese. I always say, I use a very simple expression, that the Catholic Church in China must be fully Chinese, but it must also be fully Catholic." Father Jerry, I have to say I was kind of surprised by these comments. The Chinese government is communist and atheistic. They're releasing versions of the Bible laced with communist propaganda as we speak, and the faithful and bishops are rounded up routinely. If this deal is renewed, what do you expect to see?
Well, more of the same bad stuff coming from the Chinese Communist government. I think that the comments by the Archbishop there are most regrettable. First thing I'll point out is, what deal are we talking about? This deal has never been published.
Right.
We've never seen the documents. So therefore, how can we
Good
comment on whether it's been fully implemented or been beneficial according to its own terms? Secondly, if he wants the church to be fully Chinese, well, then why aren't the Chinese bishops themselves in Hong Kong, for instance, consulted, and Cardinal Zen, for example, was completely ignored during the course of these negotiations? The facts are on the air. Just go to the videotape. You can see the communist Chinese are persecuting the Catholics. This deal is unworthy. This deal should never have happened, and it should be basically put in the garbage can, and let's start all over again.
Yeah, well, and not only Catholics, the Uyghurs, Muslims, the evangelicals, the home church people, they're all persecuted and rounded up. It's unless they toe the line of the communist regime. So we'll see what form this takes. But as you said, we still haven't seen the text of the last deal, much less the new one. Last Friday, an essay was posted by one of the victims of Theodore McCarrick, who also was involved, by the way, with negotiating that Vatican deal. These survivors call themselves Nathans. That's the term they use. One of them commented on the Vatican investigation and the forthcoming McCarrick Report. He writes this: "Persons tasked by the Holy See with investigating McCarrick's career reached out to me directly, as well as to several of the other Nathans, and asked us if we would be willing to provide facts and information to help ensure the accuracy of the report and contribute to its findings. Whereas the CDF administrative penal process back in December of 2018 that resulted in McCarrick's laicization was narrowly focused on the specific acts of sexual abuse that McCarrick committed, the more recent lines of inquiry covered a much broader scope. Based on what I've seen with my own eyes, the Holy See's investigation looks to me like a genuine search for the truth." Robert Royal, what do you make of this essay? And though the report was promised earlier in the year, when do you think we're going to see it?
Well, we heard through various sources that it was already written. So
Right.
The fact that they're reaching out now again either says they have very little confidence in what was produced by the earlier version of this investigation, or are we just getting a delaying tactic? I don't even know what to say. This month is going to be 2 years that this
Right.
investigation has been promised. Presumably, people have been coming here to Washington and digging into this material here. We've heard nothing from the Washington Archdiocese. So I don't have a great deal of confidence. I'm glad that this particular person feels that there is a more serious spirit here, but we thought that this had already been done. And I think that it's a sign that there's no great sense of urgency to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. Father Jerry, last word to you.
Penton reported on Twitter last week that multiple requests for information on when the McCarrick Report would be released were answered by no answer. In other words, they went unanswered. I think what we're dealing with here is an unfortunate bureaucratic mindset, which is that the longer something goes hidden, the less people are interested in it. And that is most regrettable. We were told by Cardinal O'Malley back in November of 2019 that the report would be coming out soon. We were also told by American bishops who visited with the Pope during their ad limites in October, November, December, that they talked about the report and that it would be coming out. The Pope back in August of 2019 talked about, or 2018, excuse me, talked about being honest and open and straightforward. In other words, the whole phenomenon of hiding things and keeping them from the people, which gave rise to this crisis, that's only going to be remedied if this report is published. So I heartily encourage those in the Vatican, those advising the Pope, to make this report public, to do it soon, because second anniversary of the McCarrick revelations should not be a moment for people saying, well, what actually happened? We need to know what happened.
Yeah, my guess is the thing governing the timetable for the release, more than anything else, there are two factors. One is McCarrick's health, and two is the lifting of the statute of limitations in these states involved, and whether they want to release this kind of data that could redound back to their detriment into the public domain. That's my guess. Gentlemen, thank you. Robert Royal, Father Gerald Murray. You can find both of their commentaries at thecatholicthing.org.